Hello, or good morning from Kansas, as it's morning here. Laura Donnelly from Dancing with Ease, Body Brain Balance, and this is the Healing Path Conversations. These are sporadic conversations that I have when friends and acquaintances who are working in the healing field are available to share with you information about their journeys, about the work they're doing, and different paths on the healing path, different ways you can activate healing energy in your life. And if you're so inclined, people you can work with to discover different aspects of healing in your whole system. This has been going on since June 2020, because I realized at that time that people wanted to access information about healing and how to take care of themselves better. And so this series features people who are working in all areas of healing all around the world. And it can be something as simple as journaling. That can be incredibly healing. It can be as complex as one of the modalities of like acupuncture or food. Food is really amazing in terms of healing and how it helps your system and what works for some people and what doesn't work for other people. So you'll find all kinds of things like that on this series. And then the essential thing with the people who share their work is that we all agree that all healing begins with the intention inside to activate self-healing. Then whatever modality we pick, whoever we choose to work with, that energy is present and it changes what happens in amazing ways. So today I have a fellow dance colleague who will be speaking today on the healing path, JoAnna Mendl Shaw, and I will bring her on and she can tell you a little bit more about herself and her journey and certain things that are coming up, because she's got some really exciting things coming. So I will talk to you. Well, actually, I'll bring JoAnna into the broadcast room and then we'll all talk together. And if you have questions or comments, just put them in and we usually can see those so we can respond to them.
Hello there. Good morning.
It's so good to see you, and thank you so much for agreeing to share your journey and your work and kind of your joy in
thank you.
Communicating with people and dancers and horses and just everything. I'm pretty excited. I have to keep my be cool, Laura. Be cool. So do you want to share a little bit about, you have a huge and long career in dance, and do you have a biography of what you would like to share with people, how you transitioned into this current work you're doing?
Well, that's a good way of asking it, Laura. I spent the better part of my career, starting at the age of 21, as a professional dancer. That was my, great dream, and I was very lucky to have a very full career. I came to New York right after college. I did not go to a conservatory, and I needed to do a lot of catching up. And I remember taking like 4 and 5 classes a day. And I got into a repertory company, and then I was the only modern dancer at a Broadway audition for Tally Beatty, who was an amazing, wonderful man who worked with Alvin Ailey. And I had trained in Horton technique, and he goes, "I want that little one in back," because I was the only modern dancer who had any Horton technique. And I worked with Tally in that show, worked on Broadway with him and then off Broadway. And then I left New York. At the time I was married, and My first husband was a doctor, and it was during Vietnam, and every doctor got drafted. And so we moved to Utah, and he joined the Air Force, and I did my graduate work at the University of Utah.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and Bill Evans was one of my teachers, and he had been offered an amazing opportunity to leave Repertory Dance Theater of Utah, which was an amazing repertory company, and move to Seattle to get to, and yeah.
Can you hear a feedback a little or
No.
not? Is it just me?
I don't.
Okay. I just want to make sure, because it's probably my computer, but just in case. So sometimes when you get a little close to the computer, it does a little feedback.
Well, just remind me, and whoa, I've got a cat on my lap. The joys of our virtual spaces these days is we get to include our animals and our environment. And I'll interrupt myself just a moment to say that the objects behind me, it's not wallpaper. These are old wick trimmers for beeswax candles, and we have a very large collection. They're sort of rare, and so I've just started in the 80s collecting them. I was working in Scotland, and I found one in an antique store in Edinburgh, and then realized that they were rare. And then every time I saw one, I'd buy them. They're not very expensive. Anyhow, that's what they are. They're for beeswax candles, and they're not made anymore because our candles, the wicks now disintegrate on their own. Anyhow, I moved to Seattle with Bill Evans. I ran his school, and I was on the faculty at the University of Washington. And then went on to form my own repertory company and got hired full-time at Orange, which is sort of like the Juilliard of the West and West. I found that I was missing home, which was the East Coast, and my parents were getting older, and I moved back to New York in 1991. But I had a really nice full career, so I got offered lots of teaching. I taught at NYU, Tisch, at Montclair State, I did a lot of guest residencies, and then I was hired at Ailey BFA Program. I was one of the first regular BFA faculty, and I did not teach technique, which was delightful. I was teaching. Excuse me, sorry about that. I want to quit my email so you don't get that ding. I was teaching composition, improvisation, mentoring choreographers, and then I got hired at Juilliard. So I had the privilege of teaching these amazing dancers. And in 1998, I was invited to do a big project at my alma mater, which was Mount Holyoke College in Massachusetts. And they have a wonderful dance program and a big equestrian program. And they hired me to make a site-specific piece that would really galvanize the attention of many people who are going to be on campus to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the 5-college dance department, which is Amherst, UMass, Smith, Mount Holyoke, and Hampshire. It's an amazing program where you can take classes in any of the 5 colleges. And it was the kickoff of a capital campaign. And I decided I want the dance department to be recognized for how fabulous it is. What if we put horses and dancers together? Now, I didn't come at this as a teenager who rode and was passionate about horses. I was a skier. I was an athlete. I just thought it would be beautiful. I knew nothing. And what happened was I spent 3.5 months at Mount Holyoke, and we worked every day. And what I noticed was that the dancers would be dancing with a ridden horse, so in tandem with the rider and the horse. But the horses started paying attention to the dancers. And the riders said, "What are you doing? This is so interesting. My horse is so interested in you." And what I realized was we were doing a kind of multi-sensory physical listening. The dancers had their hand on the inside shoulder of the horse. If you imagine a horse like this, you don't want to be on the outside of the horse because then you have to travel really fast. If you're on the inside of that quadruped, you can keep up with them. And they could feel the energy of the horse through their hands. They use their peripheral vision and their spatial sensing to sense this multitude of energetics that the horse was. I mean, horses are amazing sensory animals. Their heightened sensing is connected to their survival. They're creatures of flight. I came back from that project and said, I want to learn more. I think dancers have a kind of physical intelligence that inside of our conservatory training, inside of our technique classes, isn't really emphasized. Yes, we do a lot of somatic training that's about ourselves, but what I noticed was we have an ability to sense other moving bodies. This is a kind of empathy, awareness, compassion. I called it physical listening. And I went to my dear friend Gina, who was a fabulous dancer that I had started working with in New York. And what Gina loved was to be on the edge of not knowing. So just memorizing choreography wasn't, she was very good at it. But she loved sitting inside these situations that were more like scores and less like highly choreographed moments. And I thought, this is the perfect person. And she was also a very spatial dancer and incredibly strong. And I said, do you want to dance with horses? And she went, I'm in. So we met a few equestrians who were willing to experiment. And we just really walked out on this risk-taking limb and started experimenting with dancing with ridden horses. And we did a few performances here in New York. And then I started going to Vermont to work on the equestrian choreography for the Mozart Festival up in Burlington, which is the live symphony orchestra, and the opening of the festival is this amazing dressage being like the ballet of equestrian artistry. These beautiful formation rides, very advanced riders. And I just went to assist the choreographer the first year, and I met these amazing riders, and they started experimenting with me, and they said, we want to try this. 2 years later, we had a huge commission from the Flynn Center of Performing Arts to create this full-length performance work at the Shelburne Museum. And the backdrop or the foreground was a carousel, a historic carousel. And then this beautiful stone bridge in the distance, and the horses would come underneath the bridge and enter this gorgeous lawn space. We had a little 7-year-old, the daughter of my equestrian collaborator after this. And the piece starts with her sitting on one of those big telephone cables, and she has a huge book. And the horse rides up behind her horse and rider, and they put their head over her shoulder. And she sees them, and she closes the book, climbs onto the horse with this rider. And the rider takes her to the carousel. And she gets dropped off, and thinks about it for a moment. She starts the carousel, and one by one, the carousel horses are now ridden by the dancers. And they come tumbling off the carousel, and they befriend the little girl. They create their own strange little physical language. And then she introduces every one of the dancers to a horse. And then also a piece, much like Choreography, you have trios, duets, solos, and big group pieces. And that really launched us. And from there, we were rare without opportunities to create work in the dance world, also in the horse world. And about that time, we got a call
from a natural horsemanship instructor named David Lynchman. He was a five-star Pirelli natural horsemanship instructor. And he said, I like what you're doing. He was also a musician, and he'd taken ballet. And he said, I think what I'm doing will interest you. He invited me to the equivalent to a horse workshop is a clinic. He invited me to a clinic in Pensacola, Florida. And it was a Pirelli level 4, which is the most advanced level. And in that clinic was the equestrian director of the Big Apple Circus, her daughter, and this amazing Russian gymnast, and all of these advanced riders. And they were directing their horses from the ground, not riding them. Oh my God, it was beautiful. I was just completely seduced. And I started going to David's clinics in the East Coast. And he would bring me and have me demonstrate how we danced in tandem with the riders. Because it helped the riders feel a kind of spatial connection, and it prevented them from micromanaging their horses when they were riding. And then he started inviting us to teach a little bit about physical listening. And then he introduced us to Pat and Linda Pirelli. We were choreographing a piece with an amazing rider in Florida. We were on the Pirelli Ranch. The piece was to be done with a live symphony orchestra, and Pat and Linda would ride their horses by our pasture where we were rehearsing, and they were fascinated. Linda in particular was just an incredibly smart, curious human being who was just a lifetime learner. And she asked us tons of questions, and she said, you have to teach our instructors who are on campus here. And we taught them a little bit about how we dance in tandem with a ridden horse. And we asked if we could pass our level 1 Pirelli, and she said, yes, of course. We went out to Colorado. David came and trained us, and the rest is history. I wrote all about it in this book, which is the 23 years of our trajectory into the horse world. But what was fascinating to me is that this deeply changed how I danced and how I made dances. And I was living a double life because I was also in the faculty at Juilliard and Ailey. And I would take the dancers out to train with horses on Monday mornings at 7 in the morning. We'd go to New Jersey, and then we'd come home, and I'd go right into my composition class at Juilliard with my dusty boots on. And I brought a lot of the physical listening work into these classes. And a number of my Juilliard students and some of my Ailey students ended up dancing with us, with the horses. So I've been talking for a long time. That's sort of an overview of some of the work.
I have a couple of questions.
Please.
It seems like things just came up. You know, this opportunity showed up, that opportunity showed up. How, and it seems like to me that there were probably other opportunities that you chose not to do, not necessarily with horses or anything, but just things come up. So I'm thinking about physical listening and how you chose. Do you even know how you chose which opportunities to do?
It's an interesting question. I was so fascinated with the equine work that I said yes to everything we were offered in the horse world, but I began to say no to the dance opportunities. If there are dancers in the audience, you know, I mean, dancers are always so grateful to have opportunity, and we're often deeply underpaid. And I was less interested in showing my work on a little stage where so much of the choreographic work is already done for you. Everybody is watching you, for one thing. There are no distractions. You're not performing in a pasture. You're not performing on dirt. I became less interested in what it meant to make a dance, where you would just make up all these steps and then memorize them. That just seems so easy. With horses, our second big commission was for Virginia Commonwealth University, and we were trying to choreograph. I'm answering your question, but a long form answer. We were choreographing our first piece. It was a small section with a riderless horse. In other words, just a horse, and the horse's owner is on the ground, not riding. And it was a double duet for horse and owner and for two dancers. And they were both in round pen enclosures, and it was all parallel choreography. And the gist was it was done to a Bach prelude, Yo-Yo Ma, beautiful unaccompanied cello. And at the crescendo, the male dancer and the horse would do 3 circles and then face their partner, back up, step forward, and then relax. Very often, if you drop your energy, a horse will mirror you and they'll exhale. They won't always do that, but very often they do. So it's parallel choreography, both spatially and conceptually. And we were rehearsing during the winter in a barn in Pennsylvania, which is a whole other story. And David Lichman had come in from California to help us. He left, and we were rehearsing the whole piece. We put the music on, and Hamlet, the Arabian horse, looks at Madry, his owner, and immediately launches into the end phrase, which is the 3 circles, stop, back up, step forward, and relax. And I called David and I said, what do we do? And he said, well, he's skipping to the end so he can be done sooner. He has memorized the choreography, and many horses will do that. And the circus never rehearses anything in order. You're not rehearsing your piece in order, are you? And I said, yeah, we're rehearsing the dance. And what I realized was that with horses, you need to rehearse skill sets, and you can create modules, but you can't rehearse the piece in order because they get bored, they memorize it, and then they go, let me just do the last thing, and then I can be done. That was
funny.
humbling.
It's really funny because dancers are like beginning to the end.
Well, they don't have to. I mean, you don't have to live in memory, in your memory brain. You can live in your real-time brain and say, this cue stands for this movement, and that cue stands for that movement. And when I do this cue, so you create, it's a little bit like jazz. You create what are called passwords in jazz. When I do this, we play this, which means that you have to function in real time.
So
and
do you do
choreography,
or do you do an improvisation based on this? Now I'm thinking of, about Merson, the chance dance, and picking the order of things differently.
Right, exactly. Well, we did a residency in Ithaca a couple years ago with Jim Self, who was a former Cunningham member, and there were horses that were part of it. And Jim hired us because he was interested in exploring chance operations, because that's what Merce did. But Merce did this because he was brilliant, but the dancers were not really functioning in real time. They would throw the dice at the last minute, and then that would determine the order. We are actually determining the order based on the behavior of the horse.
So it's an improv.
It's in real time. It is, but if the horse turns to the left, I might decide to say yes, and now we're going to do this maneuver that goes to the left. Now I want you to pay attention to me, and I'm going to ask you to turn to the right. Some of it's horsemanship, some of it's choreography. In answer to your question, Laura, it is improvisation, but it is a physical language that's very specific. So the more that we studied horsemanship, the more that we realized that we couldn't just do anything. For instance, if you love doing big scattering movement near a horse, that horse will take off and run away. A lot of our movement is circular and does what in Laban is called enclosing or gathering. There's a lot of gathering energy. If you want the horse to move away from you, you use an enormous amount of spatial intention and you put your eyes out into the space where you want them to go. They read that signal. You don't need to say anything. If you draw your energy in, you will draw the horse close to you. Many horses, when they're close to you, will definitely do an alpha negotiation for who's the boss, which means they will start moving you over. When a horse takes leadership, you better know they've done it. Then you have a choice. You can say yes, or you can say, that's not what I asked you for. You need to listen to me. This is where the horsemanship becomes very interesting and important. We didn't arrive at this depth of understanding until very recently, and that's 20 years into a really dedicated study of horsemanship, to understand that it's not about dominating the animal, but it's about being a responsible partner. So for instance, I dance with a horse named Roxy. I love her. When I do these like big steppy movements, she gets really excited and her ears come forward and her neck comes up and she crowds me. Now, I used to think that was fabulous. And our trainer let me get away with it for a long time because it was fun to watch. So Roxy would be really close to me, and then, it's 1,200-pound horse. They're never going to step on you, but they're definitely moving you. What became obvious was that it's very beautiful if a horse is shaping around you rather than dancing. Oh, this is so disorienting. Flat like this.
The camera is weird.
They want to shape around you. When she was dancing flat, she was not supporting her inside shoulder. In dance terms, that would be like a dancer that's not collecting and using their abdominals to support their rib cage. It is less comfortable for a horse to be unsupported that way. And then when I encouraged that behavior, she would go into very right brain behavior, which then becomes worried. So there are the nuances of horsemanship training. If we really want to be responsible, we need to help them be the best equine dancer they can be, which means helping them. It would be like in a dance partnering. How can I help you support your body really efficiently? How can I do this lift so that I'm supporting you from your center? It's the same, but it calls for a combination, and here's the answer to your question, of improvisation and horsemanship choreography. So we are constantly translating. What does it mean to say, I want you to curve around me, but if I leave my arm out here constantly, then I'm nagging you, which means I'm asking. So I have to remember, I'm going to ask you, and then I'm going to release and allow you to take charge of your own body. That's pretty profound. And the idea of allowing the animal agency makes me think a lot about dance training when there's a lot of micromanaging of a dancer, which always felt a little bit like I didn't have the agency I needed to be my own artist at times. Now what we're doing in the horse world is trying to combine our physical listening and improvisation skills in such a way that we use masterful horsemanship. We really support these animals, but we also give them a voice. That's a level of finesse that's pretty sophisticated. And this is, like 23 years into this journey. I'm realizing the complexity of what it takes to do this level of physical listening on an interspecies level. And then it made me think a lot about how carefully are we listening with other human beings? Not so much.
Right. And when I was promoting our conversation, I put it in the Caregiver Central, which is for people caring for parents and loved ones who are kind of moving out of life. Not kind of, definitely moving out of life. And part of that is coming to a less verbal place. And sometimes, okay, there's so many things. One thing is I love the arc over time of learning, and the fact that you said that things you know now you didn't know at the beginning, and there was really no way to learn those things except by doing the work.
And I want to also tell you, there's, what you're doing is you're accumulating knowledge, and sometimes that sophisticated information, you're not going to understand it until you've taken all the baby steps.
Well, and what I asked you was that too. It's like, how did you physically listen in yourself to know which was the right opportunity and which was not a beneficial opportunity? And this is something we come to, I think, in ourselves over time through trial and error. And I think, like you said, with people, that we don't really listen that much with people. Now, I think starting in the 70s, body language got really big, and then they tried to codify it. And
that's a problem.
I knew you would think that, because as soon as you codify it, you're not in the moment.
Can I say something about that? What I've discovered, Laura, is that when we codify things, we name them and we shift them into our left brain. What we're doing as physical listeners are their soft skills. And you need to leave some of that where it belongs, in that sensory, intuitive place in your brain. I'd love to connect that a little bit to the elderly caregiving. My understanding of some people who have had strokes, and even elderly people who are losing their memory, is very often the part of your brain that knows music and singing is often intact. And that is a right brain function. And maybe at that point, the desire to be interacting verbally and logically needs to take a back seat.
I agree.
The other thing that I've learned really the hard way, because I'm a very impatient person, not in a mean way, but I'm an anticipator, is when you ask for something from a horse, you have to give them processing time. And I think that's true with people who are losing some of their cognitive function. It's not that they're stupid, it's that it takes longer, and you need to be patient and just wait. Hang out and wait. Let them process that information. And sometimes I think what we do is we find 10 ways of explaining it verbally.
Instead of just
those
waiting.
Words, instead of just waiting. Yeah.
This is something else you said a little bit earlier about I think this is true for people, is that if you spring all around and you're dancing here and dancing there, and the horse is going to take off. I sort of think when we do that verbally, or if we're just agitated and impatient, that people might stay in your visible sight, but I sometimes think that emotionally they take off.
Well, I think what people do is they check out because you've said the same thing in 10 different ways. And I think what we're doing is doing a ton of verbal processing. And I've gotten to the point where I feel like, why don't we all just choose our words more carefully? Stop, think about what you want to say, and then say it in the most concise way you can.
I was in graduate school and I had a friend who was Japanese by birth and English was her second language. And we had like 10 people in our forum, and we would talk, blah, 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 for an hour or something, and she just didn't push her way into the conversation. And so towards the end, the faculty member would say, and Yumi, did you want to say anything? And in like 7 to 10 words, she would sum up the entire hour's conversation.
Wow.
It was just beautiful,
So she's doing a lot of listening, and I think we could all just talk less and listen more. Having said that, I'm going to do a tiny little pitch for this ridiculously long book that I wrote, 500 pages, which I'm sure has redundancies, but I wanted to follow the trajectory of the work from 1998 through present, through COVID, and what we did in the virtual spaces. And I don't know, in a way, I needed to get all of that out onto the page. So if anyone's interested, it's a chronological history, but it's also essays about the lessons we learned. And then there are lots of just charming stories about what happened to us and what was funny and what was amazing. We did a big project in 2011 at the Bates Dance Festival, and we were loaned 2 white ponies that were owned as carriage driving horses. And carriage driving horses have to have a matched gait. Well, the 2 ponies were very different dispositions, and so their gaits were not matched. One was just very introverted and nervous, and the other was an extrovert. And at the end of the project, the owner turned to the man and woman who had been taking care of the 2 ponies throughout our project. It was a married couple, Stephanie and Steve, and they were so lovely with the ponies. We would arrive on site and they would take them to graze first, because part of our rehearsal process is just join-up time. Clean the paddocks, take the horses to graze, don't ask for anything. And then you slowly start to rehearse. And at the end of the project, Ansley said, listen, you can have the ponies. Take them home with you to Minneapolis. And they laughed and they said, well, we live in an apartment in the city. And they went home and Stephanie realized she was pregnant. And 6 months later, they moved out to the country and they had the ponies shipped out to them. There's the ponies, they have 3 children now. The ponies are an incredibly important part of their lives. And yeah, so there's stories like that are just really lovely and touching. And then at the end of each chapter are embodied experiences that we developed during that phase.
Oh, nice. I put the links in the comments under all the videos so that people can find the link to your website. They can find the link to the book, to get the book. They can find the trailer for the film you're working on right now, which is just beautiful. And your classes that are coming up. I have a few friends who live in that little northeast region around upstate New York. And I have pinged them in case they can come on the weekend of November 6th, the workshop that you're doing, because that sounds just wonderful, like horse time and studio time. So you're making this bridge, right, between the various listenings.
We're co-teaching with Dan McCarthy, who's a trainer up in the Catskills. And the weekend was going to be one day for equestrians and one day for dancers, but now the whole weekend is for dancers. We start with a welcoming dinner on Friday night, and then in the mornings we'll have horse time at this beautiful property right across the street from the Arts Center where we're staying. And Dan is bringing his horses there, and I will teach some of the techniques we use to move in tandem with these animals. Some of the improvisations we do that are what we call pasture dances, where they ask nothing of the horse, but they're beautiful. And and fun to do. And then we go back to the studio in the afternoon and we translate all of that into some choreographic scores and improvisations. It's super inexpensive and it's beautiful up there.
I know, and it's a beautiful time of the year to be there, the whole thing. It sounds wonderful. I'm all the way out in Kansas, and so I was really glad to see that you have some online learning labs, physical labs? Yes. I forgot what you call them.
They're physical listening labs, and I call them labs rather than workshops because I want participants to brainstorm with me. So during COVID, when we all spend a lot of time teaching on Zoom, my company and I taught a total of 12 3-hour workshops. The first set were collaborations with equestrians, and lots of equestrians and horse people came. And the second set were collaborations with choreographers and teachers, and then a lot of dancers came. For this lab, I want anyone to come. People who are teachers, who are therapists, who are somatic practitioners, who are corporate leadership trainers. And we will meet on Mondays, starting on November 1st from 12 to 3 Eastern Time. And we do embodied experiences together, but every tiny module is an opportunity to debrief with other people. It's not performative. We are also using journal writing and doodling and a number of other parts of our brain. And it will run through December 20th. So thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah. Now it just sounds, it's just, okay, it's just like the whole thing. What is your path to being here right now? And for myself, I know that being around animals has taught me so much about that, because they don't really worry about the future and they don't really worry about the past. But right now, I want my treats. And when I can just slow myself down and join them right here, right now, I just feel spacious. You know, I'm not aware of not feeling spacious other times. But when I do that, I'm like, oh, I wasn't this aware. I wasn't this right here. And I love to, I was interested in your whole story. My mom went back to graduate school at the University of Utah in the early 70s, I think, early 70s, and worked with Bill. And, so
oh my gosh.
I know. So this is the other thing. It's this, like, intersecting paths, things cross. And you move away from people, and then you come back and cross again. Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah, it was a really interesting time. And for me, it was always either have my horse and go riding, or be in the dance studio and dance. And the idea that you have created a way to do all the wonderful stuff about moving and dancing and being in connection with your body and the earth, outdoors with animals. I mean, it's brilliant. It's just brilliant.
Thank you.
And
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I did put links for the classes, for the online labs, for the workshop, and how to reach you, so that. And because you're doing things in multiple channels, people in the olden days, like when we started, you couldn't work with somebody if you weren't where they were.
Right. Exactly. One of the few silver linings to this pandemic has been, in June of 2020, we were invited to do a virtual performance. And wonderful man named Mark DeGarmo, who has a company here in New York, and he was doing these virtual salons. I mean, he jumped on it and made it happen. And I said, Mark, I think I can get you a lot of people, because he had a small audience, and 80 people attended our performance from all over the country, from Great Britain, from Switzerland, from Italy. It was thrilling. So there are silver linings to this difficult time we've been in. If it's appropriate, I'd love to say a few words about the film, if you don't mind.
Sure. When,
So this
you know
film,
when it's coming out? I mean, because you said you're about to finish filming, right?
we are, excuse me, we are in our final week of filming. It's amazing. And the film is about, I guess, a steep learning curve. Some of these ideas of merging horsemanship and dance making that I described earlier, some realizations about support that inside shoulder. Why can't I let the horse and I just have a good time? Well, because you're not being a good partner, because there's more to this than you realize, because you're not holding up your accountability and leadership for that animal. Wow. So those learning curves are part of this film. The film centers the story around two mares that we've been training with, Roxy, whom I described earlier, and an amazing horse that's owned by our trainer, Carrie Christensen. The horse's name is Pegasus. And these are two older mares, 19 and 20 years old, and Carrie and her best friend Terry, who owns Roxy, decided to have them impregnated. Older mares, so there's a little bit of risk involved. And the film begins with us training with them when they're pregnant, follows their birth, and Stefan Morel, our amazing filmmaker, was right there with them for both births. I was there for Lyra being born, Pegasus filly, which is so profound. If anyone's watched a horse giving birth, I mean, the baby comes out, and before they're barely emerged from inside their mother, their ears are up and then they stand up like 15 minutes later. It's stunning. I mean, we take years to be able to do that as human beings. And then it follows us developing a physical language with the horses, which just last week finally found some amazing realizations. We're in the round pen with just the foals and trying to engage their curiosity. They're babies, they have limited attention span. And I find myself doing this weight shift and going, and Lyra just goes, wow, that is really interesting. And I come a little bit towards her and she turns around. She's not afraid. She's excited. And she starts cantering and trotting, and then she bites Lorenzo and they both start cantering, and we use this little sound cue and this movement to just engage them in this playful explosion of activity. And I had said to Stefan, our filmmaker, I want to choreograph, not improvise. There's a lot of improvisation in the film. I want to choreograph a phrase. And the opening of that phrase is us as a herd of three humans in this side shifting. And I choreographed it in uneven increments of 10s and 9s and 7s and 5s. So it doesn't fall into that predictable 4/4, 2/4 rhythm, 5, 6, 7, 8 that lots of dance does.
Right.
And then he filmed us doing this unison phrase that goes into this huge partnering. And the partnering was based on Terry Smith's husband, Roger, has been a forest ranger. He's a PhD in forestry. And they live next to a 10-acre forest. And they gave us a tour of the forest and the interdependence of all these trees and how you maintain a healthy forest. It was fascinating. And I came away saying, I want to create partnering that somehow really picks up in this beautiful notion of interdependence, not leaning on, but this shaping with and around. So then the choreography is based on extracting these moments from our natural world learning, from the horses, from the forest, and translating them in a way. We're not trying to be trees. We're taking the human, what does it mean to be in a rhythm state? People have studied Laban. What does it mean to be in a passion drive or a dream state? So taking all of that into choreography. And then we filmed ourselves doing these phrases in a leafy opening in the forest, in the walk-in shed, in a tiny stall. So it was quite beautiful to see the choreography repeating itself in numerous locations throughout this beautiful property.
Wonderful. So do you know whether you're going to release the film? I mean, it'll probably be in editing for quite some time.
I think hopefully it will be released in late spring of 2022. For sure, we've been invited to have a screening at the Equus International Film Festival in Montana. I would love it to be at Lincoln Center for Dance on Camera, Dance on Film. And we'll be submitting it to festivals all over the country. It's going to be amazing. I'm so excited. Our filmmaker is an equestrian also. He's based in Toronto, and that alone is a saga, because getting him in and out of Canada during COVID was a very interesting challenge.
Yeah. Well, JoAnna, I want to thank you so much for sharing your journey and your passion and these ideas about listening and, like listening not with the left side of your brain even,
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it.
And then I hope that people will make some connections and some explorations on their own. And like I said, I will have all the links, make sure all the links are in all the video locations so that people can find you and connect with you and learn more about your work. So,
well, Laura, I would like to extend an invitation to take one of the labs as my guest, because I just love to have you there. So please, if you're free from 12 to 3 on Mondays and would like to join me, I'd just be honored to have you.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been just a delight, and I'm so glad that we connected even over time and distance through social media, and I'm very glad you had time today and we're willing to share. So
thank you so much. Thank you everybody for listening.
Yeah, thank you.